let's aim it directly at the governments. Let's aim it at the institutions. Let's aim it at the powers that are in place, that are the ones that are making all the decisions and that are actually ruining the planet, destroying our lives, and are only benefiting 0.01% of the population on this planet. It's absurd.
Welcome back to The Tea, the show where we dive into the stories behind the headlines. I'm your host, Myriam François. After the 15-month-long brutal attack on Gaza, nearly 90% of Gaza's population has been driven from or lost their homes. 60% of buildings are damaged, and this past November, the UN concluded that Gaza was unfit for human survival, describing the enclave as a wasteland of rubble. As Palestinians in Gaza face renewed challenges despite the ceasefire, Israel has turned its attention to the West Bank, where at least 10 children have been killed in Jenin and dozens more injured. While Israel's assault on Gaza has changed the Strip irrevocably, so too have many people around the world been fundamentally changed through bearing witness to the genocide. Today's guest is, like many of you, one such person. You might know her from her sold-out comedy shows or her iconic appearances on BBC's Live at the Apollo, but she's more than just a comedian. Jen Brister is a mother, a writer, and an unapologetic truth teller, and many of you will know her through her relentless posts and fundraising for Gaza. Together, we'll explore the intersection of comedy and activism, pinkwashing, censorship, cancel culture, and the divides shaping our world today. Jen, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Myriam. That was quite a comprehensive introduction.
Before we get into it, can I ask you to do one thing to support the show? Hit that subscribe button now and sign up to our Patreon. Details are in the caption below. Thank you. Jen, you recently returned from a tour in the US.
Yeah.
In this, it was pre-Trump's inauguration, but I'm guessing the climate may have been particular?
The temperature was of the country, I think there was quite a lot of denial going on about the prospect of Trump becoming the next president. And I think people it was literally like a nation holding its breath, is how I would describe the US in October, which was when I was there. And certainly a feeling of, I wouldn't say despair, that's not right, but there was a definite buzz of anxiety. I think people weren't surprised about Trump winning.
Yeah.
But I think that there was this, but hang on a second, the polls are saying, there was still this, like a trickle of optimism that it might not turn out the way we know it has.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess what's been really interesting to observe since the inauguration has been all these people who, purportedly were critical of Trump until now, who suddenly are like, you know what, this is actually great news that Trump's our new president and we should be on board with this new program.
Oh God, it's so tedious. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised, should we, that that these people like the tech bros sort of are moved ideologically so quickly. I mean, ultimately, we can see clearly with our own eyes what motivates people like Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, and it isn't ideology. And it isn't politics unless it's attached to money and power. For me, I've found this point in politics exhausting.
I think you're not alone. And I think that's a very relatable feeling right now that, many of us obviously have over the last year gone from maybe trusting certain, traditional forms of media much more than we currently do, because then suddenly we've been watching things online, sometimes from people that we know who are on the ground in the places where the shit is happening, telling us things that are very much the opposite of what we're hearing in the news. And so it's interesting you said that it kind of is a very confronting period in terms of like even your perception of reality, because I do wonder whether part of, removing the fact checking, giving us these sort of two versions of reality and we can't really distinguish what's what, is that maybe, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but is it part of trying to perturb us so much that we don't know who to trust? And then, these strong authoritarian figures come through and say, you can trust in me. And then we all go, oh, thank God, there's someone.
Yeah, I think it silos us into our own echo chambers and into our own tribes, and that separates us. And it's really important for capitalism to work, for us not to work together as a community, for us to be reminded that we are individuals and that our main responsibility is to ourselves, and that we should always be fighting for, in quotations, freedom, whatever freedom means to a capitalist, which means for them to do whatever the hell they want to earn as much money as they can at the expense of everybody else. And I think, legacy media needs to take some responsibility for being part of that. And I think actually we are at a tipping point where maybe certain journalists are beginning to realise that they have a bigger responsibility to talk about what is actually happening. And so it's really important for, Facebook or for Meta rather, or for X to keep us in these tribes, and by taking away the fact checking and by adjusting the algorithm. That's exactly what we're doing. I mean, I know that from my own algorithms that I have, is that I'm not seeing any other voices and I'm not seeing any other stories. And actually, I want to know what the other side is thinking.
Absolutely.
And I would like them to know what I'm thinking. I would like us to be able to communicate with each other. I haven't been on Twitter for a very long time, but I remember a point where you would be able to have a discussion with somebody. Sometimes it would descend into complete, insanity.
Yes.
But a lot of the time you could at least have a conversation with somebody. You might not change their perspective, but at least we were still talking. When that conversation is removed, then we just have, basically what we have now, which is like all-out war.
Well, I definitely want to circle back to many of those points. But before we do, can I just ask you a little bit about your activism or your engagement on the Gaza issue, on Palestinian rights? I mean, you obviously have used your humor to, talk about a lot of topics, motherhood, raising twin boys, global warming. How did you, such a huge comedian, you have almost 1 million followers on Instagram, how did you become one of the most vocal advocates for Palestine in the UK? How did this happen, Jen?
I don't really understand why I appear to be one of the few people doing it, actually. There are so many like-minded voices in comedy who are, liberal voices, who are left-wing voices, and who have spoken about Gaza, I ought to say. But I guess I have definitely been the most relentless and the most compulsive in my posting, particularly on social media. The reason I started, and I suppose the reason I got involved, was because of what we were talking about earlier, is that what I was seeing being reported on legacy media was not being reflected in what I was seeing being reported by Palestinians on the ground in Gaza. And the injustice of it. We've got men and women risking their lives to tell their story and say, look, I'm showing you, I'm here, this is what's happening. And for then to have huge media outlets reporting it from a completely different perspective, and often not even mentioning what's happening to Palestinians. A lot of the reporting on the BBC was, 60 Palestinians were blown up on the yesterday in the Nusrat camp, for example. And you're like, well, who blew them up? They didn't spontaneously combust. Who dropped the shelling? Who is it that's killing these Palestinians? At no point were we even mentioning Israel. And it was that was driving me crazy. Also, I feel like I have a platform, and I felt like I could use my platform to amplify and elevate, voices, Palestinian voices. And I thought that was something that was the least I could do. And so that's what I wanted to do. And because I wanted my voice to be heard and say, don't we all want a ceasefire?
No,
bring the hostages.
Apparently not.
Yeah, apparently not. This is the wild thing about it, was the amount of abuse I got for calling for a ceasefire. It was crazy.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of responses you've had to, calling for a ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, exclusively positive, as you can imagine. Straight after, I pretty much called for a ceasefire in October. That's when I first started posting. I wasn't posting all the time. Every time I posted, I would get an influx of abuse.
Yeah.
And so I found that my cortisol levels were really high in that period between October and January. But I felt like it was important to keep posting about that. I was very willing to have conversations with any Israeli person that contacted me, to understand their perspective, to understand how they were feeling.
So you did that?
No, I did. I spent hours talking to people in Israel. And because I was like, maybe, am I missing something? Because I'm getting thousands of messages. I'm sure a lot of them were bots, but a lot of them were genuine. And I was like, okay, I am seeing this, but you're seeing this. So let me try to understand what you're seeing. And then let's see, because it's possible I've missed something.
Yeah.
And then I was entering into these very long conversations with people, and it became very clear to me that I still to this day do not think I was missing anything. And it became very clear to me that there was a level of dehumanization of Palestinians. And I was talking to people that were very reasonable, that were very polite. No one was, no one was insulting each other. So we were having a discussion and a debate. But then it would get to a point where I would say, I'm calling for a ceasefire because I don't want anyone else to die, and I would like the hostages to come home. And they would say, well, you're deluded, or you're naive. You don't understand. Everybody, whether they be child, teenager, or adult, wants to kill us. And that is why we are here protecting us. And I was like, I don't believe that is true. And so that is why I decided that I would help amplify voices that were being censored, basically.
But your interest and your support for the Palestine movement predates October 2023, if I've understood correctly.
Yes, it did. I have on numerous occasions. I've worked with the PSC, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, and I have helped fundraise for them. And I, for the last 7-8 years, I've sponsored a child in Gaza as well through ActionAid. So I wouldn't say I was like heavily involved day to day in activism for Palestine, but I've always been supportive of Palestinians' right for their own sovereignty, their own agency, and their own country.
And just on the question of sort of people with big platforms speaking up, do you think that there is a moral responsibility for people who have big platforms, artists, singers, actors, whatever, to use that platform to speak out on this? Because the counter to that might be, how much does Justin Bieber really know about Palestine?
This really gets my nerves. You don't need to have a degree in geopolitics to understand that a genocide has been enacted, and that's wrong. Now, wherever you sit politically, whether it be on the right or the left, we can all agree mass murder is wrong. So if we all agree that mass murder is wrong...
But do we all agree on that, Jen?
Well, it seems like that's up for debate, which is the absolute insanity of it.
Yeah.
So for me, if you have a clear understanding that something is wrong, genocide is wrong, then you don't need to have a discussion with someone. You don't need to have a debate with anyone, and you don't need to second guess yourself, ever.
And what about the, I'm sure this has been said to you, it's been said to me frequently, I think it's said to anyone who isn't Palestinian, who advocates for the Palestinian cause, why Palestine, Jen? Why didn't you pick the Congo or Sudan or any other cause? Like, why Palestine? Do you just hate Israel?
I think it represents everything that is wrong with Western imperialism and the narrative that we have been fed my entire life, certainly, that the West are the good guys, that we are the ones that enforce peace, that we need to be policing what's happening in the Middle East, that we need to be policing what's happening in Africa, and that without us, that the whole system would collapse, democracies would collapse, the world would fall in on itself, rather than what is actually true, which is that we use particular countries as proxies for whatever our policies are or whatever it is that we need in order to make money. That's what the priority is, and that's what all our Western governments are concerned about. If we look at what the US government was saying about how they were working tirelessly for a ceasefire, well, we know that's what I'm talking about with the gaslighting. It's like you weren't, if you wanted a ceasefire, we could have had a ceasefire day 2. You would have said, we're not going to sell you arms.
Right.
And then the ceasefire would have been it. But it was necessary to sell arms. It's necessary to have a foothold in the Middle East. It's necessary for Israel to act as a proxy for, it seems now, the USA, maybe originally it was the UK. And we're not going to lose that for anyone. And it doesn't matter how many people die. We need it, so we'll keep it. And if it's unfortunate, of course, no one likes to see children having their legs blown off, but necessary.
Collateral.
It's collateral for Western interests, and we should all just get behind it. And what is everyone making such a fuss? It'll all calm down. Brown people kill brown people, blah, blah, blah. Let's move on.
And then you can afford your products because we'll make sure that prices are kept,
We'll keep prices low.
Yeah.
We'll keep the GDP at whatever is necessary for us to say that we're doing a great job economically.
Yeah.
And you'll all be able to stare at your phones, look at whatever it is on Reels or TikTok, and don't worry about that.
And purchase it in peace, which I think is...
And purchase in peace, man, yeah.
Yes, which is the goal,
consume,
surely.
consume.
And has the last year radicalized you? I use the word radicalized in the best sense of the term, because of course in our public arena, the word radical is a terrible word that basically means you're going to blow things up. But in my lexicon, radicalized basically means really awakening to the insane reality which we're confronted with. Would you say you've been radicalized over the last year?
Yeah. I wouldn't be where I am now. As I've set up this non-profit. I'm constantly talking about Gaza. I'm thinking about, I'm doing a lot more reading, and I'm trying to really understand how, Western imperialism has impacted not just in the Middle East, but in South America, in Africa, in Southeast Asia as well. When we look at what happened in Vietnam and Korea, I suppose the reason why the US government a lot of the times is now like, I don't know why you guys are making such a big deal about Gaza. It's because they did it in Vietnam. They did it in Korea. They did it in Laos and Cambodia.
Nicaragua.
They did it in Guatemala, Nicaragua.
Yeah,
exactly. So they're like, this is just, guys, we do this all the time.
Yes.
And I think that's, going back to your question a while ago where you were saying why Palestine, is because the Palestinians have shown us. And now we can't unsee it.
The Tea is a fully independent, non-partisan production. No corporate ties here, just a small, dedicated team working hard to bring you honest, impactful conversations. If you believe in our work, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button now and join us on Patreon. You'll find the link in our bio. I studied Arabic in college, and it is truly one of the most beautiful, poetic and rich languages. If you've been waiting for your opportunity to learn it too, then check out Lingua Verna. Lingua Verna offers flexible, large group instruction, high quality recorded sessions, and my favorite feature, live group conversations with native Arabic speakers. It's a fun but essential way to build your language skills. Lingua Verna makes learning Arabic fast, fun, and affordable. Check out the link below for a special 10% discount on an upcoming course. Would you consider yourself an activist, Jen? Because a lot of people might say, over the last year, Jen's been a real activist for Palestine.
I would never describe myself as an activist, but I am a comedian that's had enough. That's how I describe myself. I'm a woman on the edge.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense given where we stand.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I am curious to dig into why you wouldn't use the word activist. I personally think that the word activist has become somewhat of a slur. And I find that it's an interesting use of the term to describe people who refuse to sit neatly into the box to which they've been assigned. And of course, our individual boxes are the boxes through which we are profitable to the wider economy, which of course is the only function that we have in the global economy. It's to be a little nice rat in the wheel, pumping money back into the system. And if you step outside the little rat wheel, Jen, you're now an activist. Whereas some people might just say, you are a citizen who is aware of wider politics and your responsibility within a democratic system.
We are all lots of things.
Yes.
And now we're being told that we're all a thing. And that is the difficulty with what's happening with Trump at the moment, is that we are being told that there's only two genders, that there is no LGBT, that's all gone. We don't have to worry about, we're all the same. Well, one, we're not all the same, and that's great, and that's the beauty of being human beings, is that we're all individuals. But, you know, once you start creating those boxes for people, it's much easier to other them. You know, I'm not just a lesbian. I'm not just a comedian. I'm not just a person that cares about Palestine. I'm not just somebody that, you know, that has two children. I'm all of those things. But once you start picking one thing, and that's the only way that you get to describe me, well, then now it's much easier to go, well, I can't relate to her. Now, you might not be able to relate to the fact that I'm a lesbian, but maybe you can relate to me because I'm a mother. Maybe you can relate to me because I've got twins and you've got twins. Or maybe you can relate to me because you are also perturbed or upset by what's happening in Gaza, or any number of things. Or maybe you can relate to me because I'm half Spanish. Yeah? But that's not what we want anymore. You know? You're dangerous. You're dangerous because you are a woman, and because you are articulate and you are clever, and because you are passionate, and because you have a voice, and because you have a platform. Okay, so we are going to find a way to make you a problem.
I recently, for all my sins, did the stupid thing of agreeing to converse with Piers Morgan. And it was very apparent to me during that conversation that, you know, I was not going to be able to speak at all or articulate anything of what I know. Albeit you've invited me onto your show. I, you know, have lived in Palestine. I've taught politics of the Middle East at Oxford and elsewhere. Happen to have a PhD, but don't worry about that. Brand me as a half-wit, dumb blonde, which I thought was just classic. You know, how original. My point being that we continue as women to be confronted with the reality that anytime we are speaking up, we are either dismissed as being dumb. You know, I regularly see comments underneath these episodes where people say things like, girls, go back to talking about lipsticks and handbags and makeup.
Oh, please.
Yes. And so I do wonder what it is about a woman speaking up with clarity, with conviction, that is so dangerous.
Well, I can speak to it from the perspective of a comedian.
Yeah, please.
And I think the issue is that women aren't supposed to be holding space. Or holding court, you might say, as you know, my job, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it's very, for a lot of people, men and women, it can be very challenging and confronting to see that happening. Couple that with a woman who knows what she's talking about, can articulate an argument really well, and is going to be a problem because can articulate an argument so well that it's going to be difficult to get your point across, or to be able to, in the context of Piers Morgan, win. He just wants to win. Yeah. We're now moving into a world, our society is now moving incrementally to the right, and now we're moving much quicker to the right, into spaces which are governed by men, where the patriarchy is once again worshipped and platformed and, you know, is front and centre in terms of politics. Yeah. So that narrative about women knowing their place and women understanding what they need to be doing, which is taking care of men, that has now bubbled to the surface and is there and is so prevalent. Yeah. So, and is, I would say, the dominant voice in politics on the right. Yeah. So with the Republican Party at the moment. And all of those men and women their voices are now being amplified to the point where we might have maybe 5 years ago and go, okay, everyone seems to have calmed down. I can speak and everyone's listening. Great. Now that's being challenged again. Yes. And now our voices are being, well, they're trying to drown out our voices again. Yeah. So maybe we can't be heard in the same way that we used to on legacy media, or, you know, maybe I can't get on television anymore as a comedian, but I can certainly fill other spaces.
Absolutely.
And I bloody well will.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you about dehumanization and the co-optation of various identities in the context of the ongoing assault on Palestine and Palestinians. Many of us will remember the image of the IDF soldier hoisting a pride flag above the rubble of Khan Yunis just a few months into the genocide in 2023. Then there was Netanyahu mocking the pro-solidarity slogan, Gays for Gaza, as tantamount to chickens for KFC. Netanyahu, whose cabinet, by the way, has proposed allowing service providers to deny care to LGBTQ plus people based on religious beliefs, cancelling pride parades and promoting conversion therapy, no less. And not to mention, of course, that it is still illegal for gay people to get married in Israel. How do you feel as a lesbian woman seeing these symbols co-opted in this way?
Well, I think any queer person that has, been vocal about Gaza will have been inundated with messages and comments saying, as a lesbian, you have no idea what you're dealing with. If you were in Palestine, I don't know, they all seem to tell me this. It's like, I don't know where this trope has come from, but that you'll get thrown off the top of the nearest building. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people told me that. I was like, guys, as far as I'm aware, I don't think a single lesbian has been thrown off a building in Palestine. But apparently this happens a lot. So to that, I would say, one, I don't care, is my primary answer. I literally don't care. What someone's personal beliefs are about lesbians, gays, trans and bisexual people is irrelevant in the context of a genocide. I will defend the right for anyone to anyone's life, irrespective of how they feel about my sexuality. So that's not a good enough reason for me to stop calling for a ceasefire. And secondly, I don't believe that that's true.
But do you feel that queer liberation and Palestinian liberation go hand in hand? And I ask this because actually I think a lot of queer people have been very vocal about the calling for a ceasefire. Particularly a lot of high profile people I know have been, disturbing spaces. And on the protests, of course, are also very visible. So I'm just wondering, do you see those liberation movements as hand in hand? Because I know they're obviously often pitted as oppositional.
I think all liberation movements are hand in hand. There is a definite intersectionality there. I definitely feel that. And, what I don't like is how my sexuality is being weaponized in order to justify the unjustifiable. And so I definitely, I'm really pleased to see so much queer support. So many queer initiatives, grassroots organisations that are run by and are dominated by queer people, disabled people, trans people who are all fighting for a free Palestine. We shouldn't be pitting ourselves against each other. We should be working collectively for liberation for everyone and freedom for everyone.
You mentioned that you received many of these messages, that you've been conversing with Israelis about, what you were seeing in Gaza, what you felt maybe they were not hearing online. Did you ever, throughout this period, fear dehumanization sinking into your own perspective or that of others around you, be it on... Obviously, we know there's a dehumanization that has happened to those who continue to advocate for the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. But sometimes we can also miss the dehumanization closer to home when we start to sit in these polarized camps.
Oh my God, yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's very, very easy to slip into that, which is why when people talk about Palestine and they talk about Israel and they say, how can these Israelis feel this way about Palestinians? I think it's disgusting. They've dehumanized them. I agree. Any form of dehumanization is, and I'm quoting you now, Myriam, is a dehumanization. of yourself. When you dehumanize others, you dehumanize yourself. And I saw you say that on an interview, and it was so impactful, and it's really stayed with me. And
I didn't come up with it, by the way, but yes.
within the context that you said it, it was like, yeah, that's on point, and needs to be said over and over again.
Yeah.
So we find ourselves a year and a bit down the line in this dreadful genocide, and now I'm really worried that we just have to be really mindful on the left, or for anyone that's campaigning and fighting for Gaza, not to begin that dehumanization of Israelis, and whatever we think about the state of Israel, whatever we think about the government, we have to be able to separate the two. We have to be able to separate, Zionism from Judaism. We have to be able to separate individual Israelis from their government. I don't want to fall into that trap where we begin to do that, and then anti-Semitism is on the rise. I just want to be really careful of that. And I think it's very easy for that to happen.
Absolutely.
Because when we see the atrocities that are being committed by the state of Israel, it's really hard to reconcile that. And it's really hard to be, and when you're not seeing what you want to see, which is a country up in arms.
Yes.
Then that's when the dehumanization process can begin. Well, the Israelis are different from us. They don't value human life the way that we do. Rather than always trying to look back at how did Israel get there? I mean, how did the society end up there? Yeah. Yes, they have a responsibility to understand how they got there, but we have a responsibility to understand it as well.
I think I've reserved a lot of anger for legacy media and politicians in this regard, because I think there has not really been an effort to distinguish the actions of Israel from the wider Jewish community. There's actually been, in many ways, this attempt to sort of say any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, and in so doing, obviously conflating the two, which is something that many Jews themselves would feel very upset about, because many of them don't want the actions of the Israeli government, which is just a government, like Saudi Arabia. It's like saying, it's Islamophobic to criticize Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Please do. And so in doing that, I feel that the terrain has been made harder. Whereas if you said, absolutely anti-Semitism, any form of prejudice and discrimination is a no, and that's intrinsic to this movement, and that's why we march hand in hand, in fact, at these protests with many Jews. But that the actions of this government are, trying to surreptitiously, hide their actions behind this, then it would be a lot easier, I think, to distinguish the real, anti-Semitism actions that are prejudicial towards Jewish people and harming Jewish communities, which we disagree with, which we don't want to see, which is part of the wider struggle we're all engaged in, surely, for equality, and the actions of a government, just a bunch of guys that were predominantly guys elected.
Yeah.
And then, just like everybody else, they are perfectly entitled to be criticized and condemned, particularly when they're engaged in genocide, surely.
The safety of Palestinians and the safety of Jewish people come hand in hand. It's not that, because I'm fighting for the end of the genocide, that I want, an atomic bomb to be blown up in Israel. I mean, that's absurd.
It's so insulting.
And it is really insulting. I don't believe that there is any other way to resolve what is happening within Palestine and Israel other than to come to the table and start talking to each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't kill our way to peace, and I hear that over and over again, and it's fundamentally what I believe in.
I want to roll back a little bit and talk about kind of the impact that kind of talking about this stuff has had on your career, on your comedy, on how does your agent feel about it?
My agent, she's great. She knows better than to tell me not to do something. Okay. Because then I'll double down.
Okay.
So she hasn't said a single thing, and she has not told me not to say anything once. So yeah, she has been very supportive, actually. And I'm not going to talk about what her personal opinions are, because it's not for me to say, sure. But certainly she hasn't given me a hard time about my Instagram. In fact, she's never mentioned it.
Have you lost gigs over this?
I have lost work, yes, I have.
How was that couched? How was that email phrased, or how was that phone call articulated.
I was booked in, and I'd been booked in months ago.
Yeah.
And then as it was nearing the gig, I was told, and it was a corporate gig. It was quite a nice, nicely paid bit of work, which doesn't, is rare when it comes in.
Yeah.
But yes, I just got a call from my agent saying, yeah, that's gone away now. And she said, and I'm absolutely livid. And I was like, okay, why has it gone away? She said, they didn't say, but they said it was something to do with your social media. And I said, oh, right, I wonder what that could be. She said, exactly. So she had pushed back and said, what exactly is it that you don't like about Jen's social media?
Yes.
Because
great question.
We'd love to know.
Yeah.
So that I can let Jen know. And they were like, oh, there's nothing, it's just, we've just seen now. And basically the crux of it was that before they booked me, they hadn't looked at my Instagram.
Yes.
And then somebody had gone, uh-oh, no. And so that was pulled. And I'm sure, I'm sure there's certain things, television programs, which I haven't gotten on for the same reason. But I'm in a really fortunate position. I don't need to ask anyone's permission to say whatever the hell I want. I'm a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
I don't think stand-up comedians should be linked with the establishment in any way. I don't think that's my job.
So, well, I would hope not, because obviously we often rely on comedians like yourself to say the things that are unsayable, right?
But that's all a comedian's job is. As I'm supposed to say the thing that you would like to say, but you can't say.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what it's about, whether it be about Gaza or being a parent.
And I mean, on that note, I wanted to ask you about what you thought of Dave Chappelle's SNL recent appearance, in which he made the awfully brave statement that from Palestine to the Palisades, we should have empathy for all displaced people. I'm cards on table. I'm a huge Dave fan. I've been a huge Dave fan for many years. I know he's hugely controversial for many reasons.
Yes.
And he's upset a lot of people. But then again, I sort of feel like I don't know a comedian who hasn't. And I thought the statement was very blah. It was very, very vanilla. Particularly for Dave. If you're going to come for the trans community in all of your other, right? This is as brave as we could get on SNL.
It's SNL.
Okay.
So in all the other platforms, or when Dave Chappelle has been talking about, his fairly transphobic views.
Yeah.
He's been doing it in a special. It's his special. It's his hour. It's his time. It's his. You don't like it. I won't sell it to you, Netflix. I'll sell it to somebody else, and they'll buy it for a bazillion pounds or dollars or whatever.
Yeah.
Or I'll put it out and charge everyone $5 and probably make more money. So I kind of don't need you. So whatever.
Yeah.
When it comes to SNL, this is on NBC. It's a channel where every single word of that monologue that he did, that bit of stand-up that he did, would have been gone over with a fine-tooth comb by lawyers, I'm sure, because it's on a terrestrial channel. So I think the fact that he said anything, I thought was positive. Now, I can see where you're coming from. Like, if you're going to say it.
Right.
But I think if he'd had said it, it just would never have made the edit. They've got, there's a delay in SNL. They'll take stuff out.
Yeah. I mean, although I have to say, all credit to both Rami Youssef and Emil Wakim, who did both say Free Palestine in their own way on SNL previously. But I mean, clearly it seems difficult for some celebrities to say the word Palestine. Why is the word Palestine a dirty word, Jen?
And I think Palestine represents something else which terrifies the establishment.
Which is?
I think it represents an awakening, a political awakening, a social responsibility, collectively. And I think governments are terrified of us. We have to remember that. There's more of us than them. And we have a huge amount of power. And we can, if we wanted to, topple governments. If we don't want them, we can get rid of them. But we have to work together. Now, Palestine is the start of something. And we have seen how people have come together. Now, in the States, it's incredibly difficult to be vocal about Palestine, you will lose your job. You will lose friends. You could be ostracized. These are all things that are true. I don't feel like that in the UK. I don't feel like I'm taking any big risk. And if I have taken a risk and I have lost work, hey, I'll take it on the chin. It's not going to irrevocably change my life. I don't feel like I've done anything brave.
Yes, I was going to say, you're being terribly brave,
I've been
Jen.
terribly brave, sitting in my pajamas writing ceasefire.
Yes. Yes, we acknowledge that. I think it.
Where's my medal, guys?
Yes, there's this weird environment where I sometimes don't know whether the censorship is real or internalized. Meaning, there's obviously the Orwellian nature of censorship, which I'm really interested to talk to you about as a comedian, because of course a lot of comedians go to places where most of us dare not tread, right? You'll say the things as a joke that the rest of us are like, oh my God, she said it out loud, right? On whatever subject.
Yeah.
And so you're used to presumably needing to navigate those omnipresent red lines that no one has sat you down and said, Jen, don't say that thing. Or maybe they have, but you can tell us, but presumably they don't. But it's an awareness thing, right? And so most of us are policing ourselves around what we think we should or should not be saying. So for you, as somebody who navigates this space, I mean, how do you figure out what you can and can't say, what you should or shouldn't say? What is going to offend people and what is not going to offend people? Do you spend much time concerned with whether your views are likely to offend other people?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have. Maybe I should have. I think that there are certain subjects that I would choose to not dwell on, perhaps, and not necessarily because I feel that what I'm going to say is particularly offensive, but because I don't feel like either I know, either I'm the person to be talking about it, or that I can make it funny. And I think fundamentally that's my feeling, is every subject is up for grabs. Every subject, including genocide.
Yeah.
If you can make it funny, if you have an angle and you can make a joke about it that maybe will make people go, oh God, I can't believe she said that. But it also will be a valve where they can laugh and then go, and then think about it afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't think for a second comedy changes anyone's mind, but what it can do is it can be a place for people to all, that valve can go off collectively for a group of people that then brings on this need to laugh about it. And I feel like it is quite, I don't know, it can end up being quite a balm actually. But in terms of, do I feel censored? No, but I feel like I have a responsibility that if I'm going to talk about something on stage as a comedian, I better make it funny. Otherwise it's a TED Talk. Indeed,
yeah. And I understand that no one's sort of coming to tell you what to talk about and what not to talk about. But of course, whatever you decide to discuss now is going to be received in a wider atmosphere where, Meta has removed fact-checking and moderation policies, which some have called opening the gates to hate, as it removes things that, monitor hate speech and insults and that sort of stuff. And which will essentially allow users to, describe LGBTQ plus people as mentally ill. TikTok has flagged Free Palestine as hate speech. You might be aware now that you cannot use Free Palestine on TikTok. And in fact, things like Free Luigi have also been removed. The hashtag. Yes. This is all happening on TikTok, people. So we are now seeing not just the sort of internalized censorship that I was discussing, where I think we've sort of all internalized a sense of like, oh, if you say this, bad things are going to happen. And I don't actually know if they are, but we're probably just not going to venture it into that lane in case it does, which I think is worrying in itself. But now we're also seeing actual censorship operating on platforms that have been used to discuss the unsayable, the things that we're not allowed to talk about, the fact that, a lot of people may have regarded the Luigi case as symptomatic of a wider issue with healthcare inequality, or Free Palestine, because actually it touches on so many issues that people do want to talk about. some say that Musk and Zuckerberg what they're doing is basically creating a no limits playground. Some say that's a good thing. You know, Zuckerberg was recently, talking about his removal of these policies and saying, well, it's great for free speech. And I wanted to ask you where you stand on that as a comedian who probably, I'm guessing free speech is pretty important to you as a comedian. So, I mean, would you rather have these platforms moderating your free speech, or would you rather the risks that come with none of the moderation?
I mean, the whole idea that they care about free speech is a nonsense. Anyone that has been talking about Palestine on social media will have a shadow ban. So that already I know that that's a load of crap. If you're talking to me about we value free speech, we just want everybody to have a voice. Well, you don't. You don't want my voice being heard. I have nearly 1 million followers. I can't get past 150,000 is the maximum reach I've got. So I've got, 850,000 people or 800,000 people I can't reach ever.
Insane.
So, sorry, is that the free speech we're talking about? So free speech for the algorithm to elevate whatever, crap they want put out there about, trans people being mentally ill. These are then being debated and by legacy media going, and this is what they're doing, and we can say that this is a positive thing. It's like, well, why are we even having a debate about this when we know that that's not true? Don't debate something that is a lie. Don't gaslight me like that and start telling me that this is a meritocracy and an even platform where all voices are being heard equally. They're not. They're not being heard. If you're going to suppress one voice and elevate another, where's the freedom of speech there? It's a lie. It's the constant lying which does my absolute nut in. And I find myself in a constant state of rage. I have this platform. I'm trying to use it. What I think is for the good. All I'm trying to do is raise money. You find yourself in a position where you go, okay, when I put out a post now to fundraise, it's reaching, 10,000 people. That's insane when I've got 1 million followers.
Exactly.
But this guy who hates women, he's got 3.5 million views. I feel like our voices, they want us out. They want to squeeze us out. And they want to use this as a playground for their extremist, neoliberal, capitalist, misogynistic, homophobic, racist, playground. Go literally fuck yourselves.
It's actually very, very bleak when I hear you say it out loud, because obviously everything you've just said is very much what I've been feeling and thinking too, to be honest. And I remember reading that you've described yourself as an angry woman. Over the last year, when people say, how are you? My primary response has been incandescent with rage. Incandescent with rage. I struggle to sit still most of the time from the amount of anger that I feel at the gaslighting, at the double standards, at being told, as you're doing, you're raising funds for people who've been experiencing genocide, but obviously, therefore, you are an anti-Semitic defender of terrorists, Jen.
That's me.
The notion that is okay for us to kind of brand you in those terms for what you're doing is absolute insanity, and shows how far this discussion has skewed from reality. But as you say, the very platforms in which we're attempting our pushbacks are themselves skewed. And it doesn't necessarily feel obvious right now where the new avenues are going to come from. I want to ask you, in that context, about cancel culture more generally, because the right will argue that over the last decade or so that they have been the victims of cancel culture, Jen. They have been the victims of mob mentality piling on when they have said racist things, which of course is just free speech, or sexist things, which of course is just a matter of opinion, or homophobic things, which is just, their right also. And that what we're seeing now is just a recalibration. So I guess I wanted to ask you, firstly, whether you have any concerns around so-called cancel culture. And do you think we're kind of seeing the revenge of the people who were being cancelled? Is this like the revenge of the cancelled?
Myriam, who's been cancelled? I'd love this list of right-wing voices that no longer have a platform to talk about whatever, hateful stuff they want to talk about. They're all still doing it. I wasn't aware that Joe Rogan had been cancelled, or, Russell Brand has been cancelled. I feel like they're still going. They're still making their dough. That Jordan Peterson guy, is he been cancelled? Is he not?
Definitely not.
Is he struggling? No, none of these men have been cancelled. They're constantly being criticised. They say stuff and we'll go, what are you talking about? That's not being cancelled. There was a really big discussion about comedians not being able to say anything anymore, and because for fear of cancellation. Well, I don't know a single comedian that has been cancelled. The comedians that I know that have been cancelled have been accused of really extreme things like sexual assault, okay?
Yes.
And have been found guilty of that. And so therefore they have been cancelled. Fine, as they should. But not for voicing an opinion, not for having a right-wing view, not for being a misogynist or a racist or a homophobe. They are very much still working and they have an audience and they can make a living. What I feel like in terms of what is happening now is that there is a real risk for left-wing voices to be cancelled. I actually think there is a real risk. I know that there are certain legacy media outlets, that I would normally be allowed to be on a panel show on, or I'd normally be allowed to be on TV, or, just small things. I'm not going to get those opportunities. Not saying for every channel, but for certain channels, I'll be like, I think we'll just keep her.
Yeah.
Is that cancelling me?
Kind of is.
I mean, if I don't know, but it definitely feels like, and I think a lot of comedians feel like, I would rather get that job than risk losing that job for having an opinion about this genocide, for example.
We've definitely missed you on Never Mind the Buzzcocks, I have to say.
Don't hold your breath.
Yes, we won't name names, but it's interesting that when you watch some of these sort of, most watched comedy shows, that sometimes the elephant in the room is completely absent from the conversation.
Yes, and I think that's part of the problem, is if you are a vocal person, they don't trust you to not cause trouble. And they're just like, we're just an entertainment show. We don't want to talk about politics. We don't want you coming in here. And it's like, listen, if you get me on a show, I don't know, I'm not going to be shouting free Palestine every 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean?
It's every 8.
I can literally, I know how to conduct myself in a job.
Yes.
But certainly when I walk off that studio set, I'm going to continue saying all the things I want to say. And certainly you have no right to tell me not to. And if you do tell me not to, I will still continue to do it.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, I do feel there is a certain amount of censorship. Or I think a lot of comedians feel like there is a certain amount of censorship, that even if they feel quite strongly about what is happening in Gaza, they know or they feel that work will dry up, or that there is a chance that they will lose work and they might not be able to get their foot back in the door. Because it's very hard to get your foot in the door in television.
Of course. Really hard.
So to get your foot in and then be pushed out and then not be allowed back in again is a big risk for people. And so I do have a certain amount of empathy for people not wanting to risk that.
I'm just going to put it out there that I'd be very happy with less paedophile jokes and more, no names named, but, and perhaps more kind of politically conscious jokes about the reality that the majority of people in the UK or around the world are currently facing. But that's just me. I'm sure there's a huge market, clearly, for pedo jokes.
I mean, apparently everyone loves a pedo gag.
Apparently everyone likes a pedo gag. I mean, no comment. I want to ask you about, you've been fairly vocal about your criticism of the left as well, right? And about the way that left-wing politics have been sort of quite cannibalistic. I also share that concern. I wanted to ask you whether you think that identity politics has served the left, or that maybe it's hindered some of our struggles. And I say that because, have we sometimes got bogged down in the detail? I mean, people will go nuts over like the wrong pronoun, or, for me recently, I posted a picture online of a breakfast one of my friends had prepared for me in the south of France, and it had a Danone yogurt that she bought, not me, and people lost their mind over the yogurt, and were very upset with me because Danone is on the BDS list. I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point, except guilty as charged, imperfect being in front of you.
How dare you eat the yogurt that your friend bought you? I think we definitely need to chill. I think we have to trust in that person's intentions, and not just in their intentions, but in their actions. We're not always going to get it right. By the way, I'm not perfect. I'm sure you'll be able to, if you go, if you were to follow me around on a day-to-day basis, you'll be able to go, I can't believe she did that, and then she did this, and she's not perfect.
Same.
Spoiler, no.
Yes.
I'm not perfect. I am a very imperfect human being with a conscience and a level of empathy, which means that when I see something that is happening that I think is fundamentally wrong, I will stand and say that out loud, and I will use my platform to do it. Now, if you want to go through my bins, sure. And I'm pretty sure you could find something incriminating in there.
Yeah.
But I think that the difficulty with the left is that the right really don't need to do anything.
Oh, God.
They don't. They literally don't. They just need to go, they're fighting amongst themselves. Let's introduce this law which makes, abortion illegal.
Right.
Because we do get bogged down in the detail. And I often see comments underneath people's posts going, rather than going, thank you for being so vocal, they'll be like, well, didn't see you making a statement about this 9 months ago.
Yes, indeed.
Well, how does that help anybody?
Yes.
Isn't it wonderful that this person right now has spent all this time thinking about it, has gone and done the research, is immersed in it, and is probably in a sort of kind of heightened state of cortisol and grief, has now come out to go, look, guys, I just can't bear this any longer. Oh, well, funny you didn't say that when I was thinking about it. And by the way, I thought about it 3 weeks before you did, which makes me a better person.
Yes.
It's like, oh God, guys, chill.
So, but what is this thing that we have? It's like a moral puritanism.
It's a moral yeah, it is.
I think of obviously puritanical in the context usually of religion, but sometimes I feel like the left is a religion. It's like, you didn't do every single one of these things properly, and you are not aligned perfectly with every aspect of every movement on the left, therefore you're not really in the movement. And I'm like, I'm okay with not being in the left movement. I'm just going to do me.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I'm like, okay, if you don't want me in whatever your movement is, that's okay.
Yes.
I'll be over here pretty much mirroring what you're doing and amplifying your stance.
Yeah.
But okay, I'll do it alone. I find it aggravating. I also, when it comes to Gaza, there are a lot of posts going, and for the people out there that still haven't raised their voices, we will remember you. What? Jesus Christ. Now, where is the...
Are we coming for them?
Are you coming for them as well?
Yes.
Where is the motivation now to speak out?
Yeah.
Because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Absolutely.
What I want to say is, let's sit together with compassion, empathy and forgiveness. I'm a stand-up comedian. I sound absolutely like some sort of religious kind of nun or something. But let's come together and just go, look, I don't care when you join in. I don't care if it's in, 6 months.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Yes, we're so glad you could join us.
We're so glad that you're here, and thank you for joining us. And I don't care what you were doing before.
No.
You're here now. What can you do? What can you do? Let's come together, because the only way this is going to work is if we are, oh my God, a community. Yeah. And at the moment, we're not a community. We are so fractured within the left. And there is so much anger. And that's where the dehumanization begins, where we dehumanize each other. You can't trust the libtards. You can't trust the centrists. You can't trust all the people that are centre-left. You can't trust the populist left-wing nut jobs. It's like, guys, we kind of all want the same thing.
Yeah.
We may not agree on everything.
Yeah.
Guess what? The right don't agree on everything.
Yeah.
What the right do agree on is that we're a bunch of pricks. Now, why don't we all come together, and whatever anger that we have, why don't we point it in their direction? And so that we can actually make something change. And I don't even mean the people that voted for Trump. I'm talking about Trump. Let's aim it directly at the governments. Let's aim it at the institutions. Let's aim it at the powers that are in place, that are the ones that are making all the decisions and that are actually ruining the planet, destroying our lives, and are only benefiting 0.01% of the population on this planet. It's absurd.
On that note, just before we do wrap up, I want to ask you about the charity work that you are doing for Gaza, for people who might be watching, who are thinking they want to get involved, they want to support in some way, but they don't know how. Can you tell us a little bit about the charity and what people can do to support?
Okay, so I need to be completely transparent. We have not been registered as a charity yet. It's a non-profit that I started with Georgia Takacs, who's an absolutely fantastic human being. And she really is the driving force behind all our relations. And it was created in response, I suppose, to seeing so many displaced people struggling. One of the things I found the most appalling about this genocide, apart from the fact that people are being murdered in their own displaced tents while they sleep, is that all displaced people in Palestine have to buy back their aid. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it before in my life, where aid is allowed in, aid is not escorted into Gaza and distributed to people free. It is then looted. It's watched. The IDF are aware that these gangs loot these aid trucks. Then these gangs sell the aid back to markets, and then they sell it at even more inflated prices, with a commission of 30% on top. Okay? I don't think I have ever heard of anything so cruel in my life. So the reason why I got involved was to just help families originally to, for people who might not know, many families have a GoFundMe page, or more recently a Chuffed page, which allows them to ask for donations to keep themselves afloat, so that they can buy food, maybe they can buy a tent, maybe they can buy a stove, whatever. And I wanted to originally just help share people's pages so that they could raise money. That then led me to Georgia, who was doing this for 3 or 4 families. I said I'd help her, and then it grew and it grew. And it has led to us having, I think we've got 18 families now that we subsidise and help. We amplify their GoFundMe pages, but we also fundraise separately, and we give them cash. We give them money. Yeah. So we're not offering aid. We give them money, and they spend the money as they see fit, whether it be for their rent, whether it be to buy a new tent if they don't have an apartment, or food, whatever they want. That's what we give it to them for, and we constantly need donations. At the moment, people are looking to rebuild their lives. That's all they're looking to do. So rebuild their homes. A lot of people have found an apartment that, when I say apartment, a shell of a building that they can rent that's definitely one up from a tent.
Right.
You're not going to believe these places cost about $1,000 a month. We want to be able to help people pay their rent so that they can then start to rebuild their lives and and it will be from the bottom up. I don't know how long it will take. And that's what we're trying to do, is offer Palestinians agency, offer them hope, offer them solidarity. And we all anyone who'd like to help us is very welcome. We are always welcome to people helping us fundraise if anyone has any ideas. Also, I have loads of families who we haven't been able to take under our wing. If anyone would like to sponsor a family, I would happily put you in touch. They've all been gone through Olive Branch. They've all been verified. They are all genuine families. And please get involved. Thank you very much.
And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you about that?
You can DM me. You can DM me on Instagram. That might get lost because, I get quite a lot of messages, or you can message Georgia and I through our website, All Our Relations.
All Our Relations. Wonderful. Okay, Jen Brister, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Myriam,
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap on season 2 of The Tea. A huge thank you to everyone who tuned in, new and old, friends alike. And of course, a thank you to our wonderful team. We're so grateful for our guests and most of all for you, our viewers. At a time when trust in journalism is at an all-time low and corporate and political interests shape the narratives we consume, independent voices matter more than ever. Here at The Tea, we're committed to digging deeper, questioning the stories we're told, and uncovering the stories behind them, all to spark thought and meaningful conversation, and perhaps even a little action. We hope you've enjoyed this season as much as we have. The Tea is a fully independent, non-partisan production, no corporate backing, just a small, dedicated team bringing you honest, impactful discussions. If you believe in what we're doing, please support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel. Just hit that subscribe button now. You can also join us on Patreon to help us keep this work going. The link is in the bio. Stay tuned for season 3. Follow us on Instagram for updates. Thanks for watching The Tea. Please remember to like and subscribe. And if you've made it this far, why not keep going and check out this episode?